What, if any, role should philanthropy play in place-based economic development? We'll talk about that today on Builders Live. As people across the United States think about reshaping their economy and have for the last 10, 20 years, the role of philanthropy has often come up. How do we shape economic opportunity, mobility, and opportunity? What is the relationship to entrepreneurship and workforce development, workforce pathways? Whether government, philanthropy, the private sector should take the lead or play a part is often something we discuss in private meetings, in public gatherings. We're going to talk about what we're seeing around the country on today's recording of Builders Live. To do that, I'm joined by my co-host, Victor Hwang of Right to Start, Taylor Eubanks of many hats, Rae'Mah Henderson also of many hats. I'm now losing my sight of what I'm supposed to say, so I'm going to make you guys reintroduce yourselves again like last month. Rae'Mah, Taylor, Victor, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We got some big terms today because all of us I know have seen lots of success stories. We've seen the community foundation in the regional ecosystem put dollars to a planning or a strategy document, or to seed the first few organizers of a startup community event, or to shape workforce strategy. I've all seen those brilliant successes, and often it's philanthropy as kind of risk capital, or philanthropy thinking of economic opportunity as a market failure that they can help correct. Those make sense to me, but there's also ways that this gets messy. So I'm hoping that we can do two things. We always start off with a bright light from ecosystem life. I want to do that with you guys, but I almost wonder if any of you have any bright lights that semi-relate to the role philanthropy plays, or civic do-goodery in and around ecosystem building. So I'm wondering if we could even start that. I can model the behavior because I kind of threw that question at you. One of my bright lights, of course, is getting to see some of you guys for a live recording just a couple weeks ago at our Builders Conference. But I thought this was an interesting role that philanthropy played. We, technically a news organization, work with economic development orgs. Very proudly, we intend that to not be a philanthropic or charitable act. We help communicate stories, and we don't want them to be seen as philanthropic. But we often find some of our reporting and some of our organizing doesn't quite fit neatly into market incentives. So something we did at our Builders Conference is we unveiled a vision statement for Philadelphia, the city we hosted this conference in and where we started technically, a vision for Philadelphia 250 years in the future, informed by speaking to 1,000 Philadelphians, a 3-year reporting project. That vision statement's smaller version is going to go into a time capsule. It's inspired by a mural. But the talking to people about a long-term vision and crafting it over a long-term time horizon, like 250 years, didn't fit really neatly into market goals. So we maybe got a couple private companies to chip in little bits of money, but that was way more kind of like on the margins. Our lead was a group of philanthropists that were funding work around celebrating the semi-quincentennial, and the City of Philadelphia's Department of Commerce seeing it as kind of long-term steward of their economy. So I was really proud and excited by that. I'll drop in the show notes the final 96-word vision statement. But it was 1,000 Philadelphians. It was talking to lots of people about what they wanted the long-term vision of their ecosystem look like. And philanthropy was really necessary because it was a time horizon that didn't quite work in a lot of market needs. But I am deeply proud of it, and it's something that we'll look to think about where does this economy or group of people want to go. And that was a good example for me of where I want philanthropy to play a role. The market's not going to solve for this, but we want people thinking like this. Kind of Taylor, Rae'Mah, Victor, do you guys have a recent bright light where you saw philanthropy play a role that felt right to you in this work? Victor, I'll throw it to you.
Oh, gosh. Well, there's so much good philanthropy that goes on in different ways, and much of it under the radar. Well, I'll call out a group I've been working with. So it's actually, I have one project I've been working on for 6 years outside of Right to Start, which is the Ralph Wilson Foundation. And they do two things there, two geographic areas. One is Detroit and the other is Western New York. And so we've been working on a whole series of efforts there. And one of the things that we launched there over the last few years was a series of grants for ecosystem building called Springboard. And the idea was to sprinkle entrepreneurship like a layer of snow across the region. And so the idea was to give small catalytic grants anywhere from 10K to 50K to help spur things in the entrepreneurial ecosystem that otherwise weren't going to happen on their own. And it's had a huge effect. There have been a few dozen of the grants issued. It's caused all kinds of energy and activity and things that otherwise wouldn't exist. And the idea was not to directly assist entrepreneurs with the grants, but to assist organizations that were trying to do things to build the connections and ecosystems to support entrepreneurs. And it's been really successful. It's actually caused a surge in activity across the region.
Taylor, Rae'Mah, examples, using bright lights of the moment. Rae'Mah.
I'm actually going to shout out a technically article. So I'm going to shout out Pittsburgh. You guys actually named it. It's 2025 Startup Ecosystem of the Year.
True.
Okay, so shout out to Pittsburgh. Ain't been there, but I'm going to shout them out.
Yes.
And I'm going to say it because I think that they have a good, clear example of philanthropy and anchor institutions like Carnegie Mellon and UPMC and government all playing like really good coordinated role. And I think it's a good example of a nice stack. So Pittsburgh is my shout out for the day.
I love that, Rae'Mah. And actually, let's do that case study as we dive in, because I'm happy to also take the voice that people in Pittsburgh sometimes get worried about the role philanthropy plays. But it's absolutely true that Pittsburgh, for lots of historical and industrial reasons, has a really interesting role that foundations have played in seeding their innovation economy. And that is why we named them the 2025 Ecosystem of the Year. Good shout out, Rae'Mah. All right, Taylor, give us a shout out yourself.
Hey, we're coming for it next year. But I'm in Wichita. It's one of my favorite places ever, if you know me. So I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I'm at WSU Tech today, taking this call. But my bright light is I am hosting Groove Capital here in town today. And we're touring around some of the WSU Tech facilities, meeting with Philanthropy. And we were invited, buckle up, to the quarterly Kansas place-based catalytic impact investment ecosystem coalition meeting.
Do it to them.
Can you say it again? Okay. So when I was in my role at the state of Kansas, it was just kicking off. I think I attended one, maybe two meetings. And so this is my first meeting that I've been invited back. It's hosted by the Kansas Health Foundation. But first one I've been invited back since leaving my role at the state. So now that I have my entrepreneur hat on and I'm back fighting the good fight, I'm really excited to see where impact investing is and how that conversation goes. So that's my bright light. Shout out Prentice Keller. She's in another pod somewhere on the facility.
Love the pod. Love the pods and the facilities.
They're fancy. The air conditioning unit is very nice.
Oh, excellent. We'll get back to the air conditioning portion of the programming later. All right, let's start with some first principles. A technically contributor many years ago, shout out to Bonnie DeBoer. I always remember this piece. I love this piece, in which he said that we then referenced for many years after. His argument, every nonprofit is a policy failure, which is a statist take, but an interesting one nonetheless. And philanthropy plays this kind of role. That what is philanthropy? Well, we, in our society, confer tax advantage status with the interest of letting private dollars address community problems in a more adaptive way. That's like theoretically what's happening here in the broad sense. Economic development, as it's evolved over the last century, as you guys can speak to this better than I can, if it was controlled at all, tended to be more under the government action, because we wanted it through democratic systems, that we wanted to shape our economy through the most shared resources, through our government, which theoretically has democratic checks and balances. But in the 20th century, we started to privatize some economic development. We've seen this around the country, of there'd be quasi-governmental agencies, or there'd be private associations or whatever to stand up. And as we all know, in economic development, that means all kinds of organizations: nonprofit, for-profit, tech associations, lobbying groups, economic development groups, governmental, non-governmental. Philanthropy operates all over the place. And so I want to start with first principles and have you guys give me your read of how do you view the right role for philanthropy to play in economic development? Should it be in this at all? And Victor, maybe I'm thinking of you as you travel around this country. Is philanthropy out of place in conversations around economic opportunity, shaping economies, and the like?
Well, I've right to start. We benefited a lot from philanthropy, so I think philanthropy has a huge role. And I was at the Kauffman Foundation, and I saw the power of philanthropy in entrepreneurship, because Kauffman, going back to the 90s, the whole idea that entrepreneurship could be a philanthropic cause, it actually was not accepted as something you could do in philanthropy going back 3 decades. Kauffman really helped pioneer that, and the general counsel there, John Tyler, helped really build out a whole field of what is legal to do philanthropically in entrepreneurship. And so just that idea is pretty innovative if you think back on it. The idea that you can philanthropically help people make money is actually kind of an interesting concept. I think it's got a powerful role because in the US, we've got this kind of a grand bargain, right? Which is that we create a society to let you be, and in theory, at least, to let you build the life you want. But the problem is that leaves a lot of gaps. And so philanthropy, we call on philanthropy to help fill the gaps. In the US, I don't know if you guys know this, but historically has been one of the most philanthropic nations on earth. For about 2 decades, it was the most philanthropic nation on earth. Now it's still in the top 10. And it's the most philanthropic Western country. And so I think there's something about this country in that it's not only encouraged, it's expected that you will engage in philanthropy in some way, right? It's sort of part of our fabric, that it's understood that there will be philanthropy. It will be always tackling problems in the world. I think the challenge has been with philanthropy is what problems to tackle. And that's worth going into a whole bunch, because I think it often becomes a state of dependency and ends up filling gaps that society should otherwise be solving in other ways. But it's really good at tackling things that otherwise wouldn't be solved in the system we have.
Taylor, what's your bet? When are you like, yep, thrilled philanthropy is here, versus when are you like, I don't know why philanthropy is here?
I'm not sure I've ever said, not sure why philanthropy is
All right.
here.
Fair.
Okay. Never say never. Who knows? For me,
well, actually, let me not give you a softball, Taylor. You're too good to get a softball.
Okay, yeah, hit me again.
It is in the moment when you are ecosystem builder in XYZ city, just trying to piece it together. It is sensible, and I can understand why you view the local community foundation as easy money. But we probably should say, like any dollars, those dollars could go somewhere else. And so if your local community foundation, and this is where I'm going to close us, so maybe I won't eat my final question, but I think it's more interesting to think about these as trade-offs. Do you want your community foundation prioritizing building the economy of the future, which I think is the best case argument we'd make, right? That's why you'd say, why are you supporting startup economic development or entrepreneurship or workforce? That you're trying to prepare for a future of tomorrow versus the crises of today, soup kitchens and housing. There's any number of other issues you could take on. So then to reframe my question, Taylor, when are you as a resident of Wichita, Kansas, or otherwise saying, I'm glad my foundation's dollars locally are going toward this entrepreneur ecosystem building, versus, gosh, we do have some very urgent problems and some of my neighbors are in very real pain. How do you think about weighing those two things?
Yeah, no, of course. So I'm a candidate. That's hilarious. I'm a resident of Lawrence, Kansas, born and raised. It's okay. All good. Wichita's pretty cool too. But one thing I've learned recently is there's about 900 community foundations in the US, right? 115 of those are in Kansas. I learned this. Wow. I just fact checked myself too. And so as
the value of being on a podcast with a news organization that our co-hosts fact check themselves live. Thank you, Taylor. All right,
I'm just saying I know the expectation here.
Yeah. Good.
And so most of what I've seen from my time in the Bay, San Diego, and then returning back home, most of what I've seen philanthropy trying to solve or tackling is adaptive, right? We all know economic mobility, ownership, ecosystem, cultures, all of these things, right? But it gets treated as technical. Let's fund this single accelerator. Let's write this grant that's going to do this single one thing. But how is it connecting all to and throughout. So for me, where I am hopeful we can begin to bridge is really understanding the leadership principles behind philanthropy and how we can be connecting with philanthropy, leveraging the KLC core framework. So Kansas Leadership Center, I've mentioned them before on previous podcasts. They have leadership principles, right? So the leadership principles are things like leadership is an activity, not a position. Anyone can lead anywhere, anytime. It starts with you, and you must engage others. Your purpose must be clear, right? So as we're looking at those, how we are framing those adaptive challenges, we're going through them, right? We're checking down that list. But then my favorite, and the one that I feel like I've been most impacted by when engaging with philanthropy, leadership is risky. What we do in the ecosystem, it's risky as heck. And so understanding how to engage with philanthropy, what the function is that they are hopeful to serve. Are they addressing these challenges from an adaptive lens or a technical lens? And then meeting where they're at. I don't think you can push philanthropy to be what you want them to be. You really have to build that case and build it for where you are. I hope that answers your question.
Rae'Mah, like I'm starting from a very institutional lens. Actually, I did my own little bit of reminder fact checking myself. I was trying to pull up a chart that I can't find, but that puts us in the context that government spending meaningfully outstrips private philanthropy, and so there's always a good reminder of philanthropy just like cannot fill all the gaps that someone assumes government should do. But another step that I've seen charts like this in the past that I'm pulling up of like when we think of charitable giving, 70% of it's individuals. You writing your $100 check to the soup kitchen is 70% of charitable giving. $1 in $5 are from the kind of foundations we think about, and corporate CSRs, much smaller sliver, something like 5% of giving. So charitable giving comes in a lot of forms. I am thinking a lot from the institutional lens because I know a handful of ecosystems around the country. Pittsburgh is an example of this. Miami and the Knight Foundation is an example of this. George Kaiser Foundation in Tulsa. Kaufman in Kansas City, of course. We do have around the country examples of interesting philanthropies that have said the economy here is a social good. And typically that is some theory of change around if we want to thrive in the future, we need to give people opportunity today. But I'm taking a very foundational lens. You and your ecosystem building, I have to think you also see individuals doing this work, be it like dollars or time. So maybe just jump in here around what is the role of philanthropic supportive ecosystems from an individual level or a smaller level than the lens I'm taking right now?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a philanthropy scholar, but what do know.
You're the practitioner. It's what we want. You're doing it.
Exactly. What I do know is I've seen some philanthropists up close here in Alabama through my work at Techstars, asking them to come speak with founders and tell them their story. And I'll say that I think the philanthropic dollars have actually moved the needle a lot in our ecosystem. And they came from people who built here in the state and who understood what it took and who gave back with that same operating instinct. I don't think they were always funding from a theory. And I've had a few admit like, I'm just risking it for the biscuit out here. They're taking risks on deals that may never give them a return, but they're funding a gap that I think they personally recognize when you're speaking to like charitable, social good. And I think proximity is everything. So when you felt like the friction yourself and you've been out, I think fundraising in a state like Alabama where we don't have like an incredibly robust VC ecosystem, it's just like a different story from somebody who's going to fundraise on the West Coast. So I have a positive take on it. That's what I'll say. And I think that's more so coming from still having that accelerator background.
We did a few years ago, technically did, I did an interview with a prominent VC. And at that point, Alberto Barwan, who was leading the Knight Foundation at that point, and we had a kind of conversation on this. It was a little more set up as like, what did VC have to learn from philanthropy, and what did philanthropy have to learn from VC? Was the setup of the conversation. But in both cases, the sense was that the ultimate goals were different, right? Like, VC is meant to create alpha, like above market returns is our focus, and philanthropy can have a different goal. Each philanthropy could have a slightly different goal, but it's something about solving some market failure, whatever that is. Some market opportunity that they do not think the government or the private sector is resolving. That tends to be where philanthropy steps in. And in my experience, you guys can jump in here, but around the country, I've seen different kinds of philanthropies view that differently. Some view themselves as truly through transformational work. We want to, and I'm going to put our bets on advocacy and experiments, but we want to like get something started, and then we hope either government or the private sector takes it on, kind of transformational work. We're going to catalyze and get out. Or in some cases you say, hey, we think this is a persistent market failure. We're going to like steward this for a long period of time. These are slightly different approaches. And I will also note, I know lots of ecosystems where philanthropy locally just does not see this as their lane altogether. They view this as kind of like rich people stuff, or like, the economy just feels like out of their lane, and it's not what they should be doing at all. And I've seen kind of all of those plays. Do you guys have an opinion? Is this gonna just be different at different regions? If you were talking to an ecosystem builder who said, I want to get philanthropic dollars locally to pay attention, would you give them any guidance? Just talk to me a little bit about what is consistent across markets and what seems unique in each place.
I'll tap in here and I'll say, I think we had a podcast episode a couple maybe months back where me and Taylor, I think it was Taylor's first episode, we joined in. We were talking about when ecosystems bet on one person. I think I that as a similarity across ecosystems where we all have these big players who are willing to participate. But I think it's friendlier money maybe, but it still opens up the risk for them to be burned and leave or withdraw from participating.
Well, there are lots of case studies. I won't get too into details, but I will tell you, after close to 18 years reporting on this beat, something that I will tell you from my outside perspective is I'm always a little bit worried of this tension that I've seen. Let me start again. I've seen two approaches, I think everywhere. I think everywhere is one of these two. And both sides complain about their approach. This is very grass is greener. You guys can fact check me. But either I see an ecosystem strategy where there is real momentum around one organization and often one leader, and that is sometimes philanthropic, it's sometimes corporate stewardship, it is sometimes economic development, it is sometimes just really charismatic, like local connector. And that ecosystem can move real fast, but a lot of concentrated risk. And I have now seen some examples over that time where like the leader falls, something changes, and then like all the momentum's gone because it was all around that one person. And then I've seen the distributed model, which I think sounds to me more ecosystem model, where it's like a little bit chaotic and there's many leaders and everyone's always complaining that no one's leading and the chorus book's not the same, but it's very resilient because it's a many-headed serpent. You can't cut off one head. And I've seen both these approaches, the move fast, concentrated risk, and the many-headed serpent, slower moving, but hard to knock off its block. And I have reservations about both. I've heard people complain about both. I've never gone to an ecosystem and not had someone inherently complain about them. And I have found philanthropy shows up in both, but one, they're kind of like a bystander. Oh, philanthropy supports a couple little things here or there because there happens to be a grant manager who's involved, or like there happens to be a little bit of. I've also seen times where like, Knight Foundation took Miami on its shoulders, and there's a real story. I feel like we were a little part of that some of the Miami story was a generation of Knight Foundation leaders said, we're going to do this work around arts and innovation. And I view it as like, that is a storytelling case study. It's an investment case study. And some of it didn't work, I will call out, and it's created local political issues, but some of it really progressed. So talk to me a bit about how you guys see that dynamic. Test my premise, but on the move fast but concentrate risk side that philanthropy has played in some places.
I'll give it a shot. It's very lumpy, and I think the challenge is actually in a region is you kind of just take what you can get. And there's a lot of regions which are very philanthropy rich. You think of the Detroit region, for instance. There's so many philanthropies in and around Detroit. It's an entirely different game. And Detroit itself is going through a renaissance right now, in large part because philanthropy has played a huge role in kickstarting the flywheel that's over the last 15, 20 years. But there's other regions where there's like next to nothing or nothing at all. And so I think a lot of it is just, what do you have to start with? And so sometimes you get one philanthropy, one rich individual that cares and wants to give, and other times, and when you have that, you're just lucky and you just go with it. But one thing that's unique in the US, because we were talking about the US and other places, is that philanthropy is a core part of policy strategy in the US. The US is the country with the most large institutional philanthropies. This phenomenon just doesn't exist to this extent anywhere else in the world. And so when you go to other places in the world, the question is always around policy, not philanthropy. In the US, anytime there's a policy discussion, I've seen this. People always think, oh, who's the big philanthropy to pull into this one? It's just an interesting thing that it becomes part of the regular discussion of how do you enact change in a society. That pretty much doesn't exist to this extent anywhere else. It's just what we do as Americans, and it just becomes part of the discussion all the time. Is to drive change, you must have philanthropy there, and it creates a whole different way of thinking, which means sometimes it's some individuals that are empowered in that philanthropy. But I will say too, the difference between individual giving and large institutional giving is pretty profound, because individual giving will give to the stuff that tugs your heartstrings because they understand it. It's natural. It gives you that feeling. But to get to the level of systems change, it's really hard to do that at the individual level. Like most people donate as a personal matter into systems. It's just a weird thing to give to individually. We should do more, but we don't. But it takes institutional philanthropy to get to that level of thinking, because they have to think about, okay, how do you not just give someone a fish? How do you teach them how to fish? How do you create fish schools? What are the environments to make fish schools easier to start? And all that, right? All those questions that become second, third, fifth, or fourth order questions are what institutional philanthropies do, either well or badly. But only institutionals are the ones that can really do that.
Some of that sounds, I've had those, I think I've gone toe to toe a few times with philanthropy, because some of that transformational change makes sense to me. I can understand hey, we're about to take a 5, 10, 15, 20 year time horizon. I do, from more of the outside than you guys, I view this as being a 90s to 2000s coffin success story. I know there's all kinds, but I view it as it was a successful effort of longitude. All of this is messier than anyone wants when you're inside, but like a long-term change. But I've had in other contexts back and forth about when is something a more permanent market failure and philanthropy is the sustainability, like it or not, versus when is there a transformation we're going for. It's still going to probably be a longer timeline than anyone wants. And I remember Alberto saying it's like patient capital. Go ahead, Taylor.
No, I've got something cooking over here. Back to Kansas Health Foundation here in Wichita. So they have a really cool program that I've studied quite a bit, but it's called Building Power and Equity. It is a 30-year commitment. No. I lied to you. It's a 10-year commitment to 30 organizations, $100,000 at the top of each year. And so my view on this is they're positioning themselves as an anchor, not as the conductor with these organizations. Many of these organizations are Black and brown, and it's beautiful the way that they're pulling them together. And so positioning as an anchor, committing 10 years to the specific practitioners that are doing the work. They're doing really good work within the ecosystem, but not to, rather than dictating, okay, this is the specific program, this is the thing you're going to do, all on. It's funding the connective tissue between. So I think getting away from, that sort of repetitive cycle of hey, Omni Circle in Topeka, you have these goals every single year. Here's the grant cycle. Here's what we need you to do, and this is what it's going to look like. By committing those multi-year things to the entities that are doing the good work. And yeah, you might have goals for when it's time to sunset, and maybe we sunset these entities ahead of that 10 years because they hit a threshold. Let's bring some new ones in. Let's do some additional outreach to backfill that, right? And there might be organizations that don't make it to the end of the 10-year period. And so we have that capital that's opened up that can be then redeployed in the same way. And so I really, really like the model. It's the first time I've seen it in practice and followed it. But I think they've done a really good job of establishing as an anchor with a specific program and less as a conductor of what gets done, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic example. That's an example that's going to stick with me, because I'll add in a little humor here, because I'm thinking about Victor when he's saying, and there's some ecosystems that have neither. And I've been the summer, I spent a week in Flint, Michigan with my family last summer. I was like, yeah, they have nothing. I need them to have a philanthropist or an organization. And even thinking, Detroit is right up the street, and they still don't have the anchor or the conductor. So like, maybe it is like the lesser of two evils, but it needs to be one of them.
Ton of stuff
from that, Rae'Mah. I think the strongest ecosystems have a blend of both, right? You have these sort of anchors that are there. We know those foundations. We know philanthropy is there. And so then if you have an entity that is just thriving in those spaces, maybe they're like the single operator that are championing affordable housing, or they're championing, whatever it might be. So maybe it's like a blend of the single entity. We're getting a little bit further away from the single point of failure, but then it's also that distributed model too that builds power and equity across.
Yeah.
Subtle plug.
And I'll apologize to Flint now, because I do not know the anchors or the conductors. If you guys are doing the work, please do not come for me. I'm not done.
You're going to get some letters from Flint.
I know.
Get in the comments. Get in the comments on Rae'Mah. Her name is Rae'Mah Henderson. Her email is
let's get her the address and everything.
The conductor's great metaphor. Man, I want to dig on there, but I want to push forward in a related matter. Because Victor, you were getting at something important there. Of it's different here in the United States. As a journalist, one of the things you get trained that you would initially get real wary of is, in theory, like or not, when government deploys something, it theoretically has some democratic drawback. Like in theory, we want someone who faces the people, who is responsible for some behavior. Philanthropy doesn't have that. And that has pluses and minuses, right? There's a board and there's an oversight, but it isn't the kind of lowercase d democratic systems that we're accustomed to. That theoretically, why do we want to put dollars through a government system? Because in theory, democratically elected representatives have to represent the constituents and have to spread that. Now, I've heard the take, and I've heard philanthropy say smart stuff that one reason we've evolved the tax code we've had is we want to create an ability to have experiments, and we want the ability to let little concentrations focus. If one neighborhood just gets a lot of momentum, if one region accrues a lot of capital, you want that to play out and say, can we learn from that? If we are willing to actually learn from it, which is a whole other message. But I mean, Victor, you've worked inside of these, machines. I wonder what you guys think about this idea of the risk of philanthropy as a primary steward of an economy is that it does not face voters. That is one of the classic criticisms of a philanthropically led economic development strategy. Thoughts on that?
Yes. All these things are like days of conversation. I think the issue with philanthropy, and this is something I've seen, and I've seen this in every philanthropy, including at the Kauffman Foundation, is the constant question of who is the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Because the customer, is it like in the case of entrepreneurship, if entrepreneurship is your strategy or economic mobility is your strategy, is the customer the entrepreneur? Is it the nonprofit grantee? Is it the grantee? Is it the entrepreneur today, or is it the entrepreneur in 10 years? Or is it the foundation in 100 years? Who is the customer? And that varies depending on who you ask within the foundation. So even within the foundation, that is a constant, multifaceted answer. And so then you kind of go out and you think about all the foundations out there and who they think of as the customer, and you end up with all kinds of questions. One of the things that I thought made some difference when I was at Kauffman is I really tried to bring the idea of design thinking into the foundation, because the design thinking forces you to ask, who is the customer, and are we meeting them where they are, and are we helping understand their world and solving the problems that they actually are dealing with. But that's a rare thing actually amongst philanthropies. You don't really hear that, or even if they say design thinking, they don't really understand it, because and then we also brought in lean process thinking at Kauffman to try to think about how do we serve customers more efficiently and faster and with less steps. And that is a very rare conversation too amongst philanthropies.
Did you get to an answer on who the customer was?
There's no one answer, I guess, because
that's why it's hard.
Yeah, it's ultimately there's no answer. It's the entrepreneur, it's the grantee, it's the foundation, it's the community, it's the foundation in 100 years. It's all of those all at once, which makes it very hard to run a philanthropy, right? Because everyone has a different view of that, and that will never fundamentally change. It's just the nature of the beast, the way you design it. In a democracy, in theory, the customer is the vote of the people. It's 50% plus one always, right? In theory. In a philanthropy, because a lot of them are set up as perpetual institutions, it's just a constant swirl of discussion. Interestingly, the philanthropies the new ones where they're time limited are really interesting as well, where they have to spend it all. Like the Ralph Wilson Foundation I mentioned earlier is a 20-year spend down. They are at halftime right now. They're a little over 10 years. And a lot of philanthropies are like that. I think Gates recently announced that they're doing a spend down now as well, which is huge. So all that is it's an endless question that every philanthropy will interpret differently, and everyone in a philanthropy will interpret differently as well.
So the comment in the chat there from, can it change over time? I think that is probably yes, of course the answer. And Taylor, you were getting at it. I saw you in the comment that partly you would say, well, the role that philanthropy or someone outside of the democratic electoral system is someone that can survive multiple electoral processes. We all know that when economic development has thrived in entrepreneurial support or kind of economic change, it's when it's someone who can survive mayoral gubernatorial transitions, which we know is a really thorny thing. And I've come to a new level of respect for those practitioners inside government, inside institutions, who have to walk a little differently because they know an election's going to come up, new priorities going to come in, and they need to make sure their initiative doesn't look too much too tied to one administration. There's a savvy to that, but I feel that weight a lot. I love that idea of who's the customer, Victor. I'm thinking at our Builders Conference, shout out to Tim Van Recken, who leads Montana's Headwaters Tech Hub, who's at the conference, and it's been sitting on as a tab in my browser, and I haven't done anything with it yet. But Tim said that ultimately entrepreneurship's not my goal, it's a means to an end. He's like, I'm interested in quality of life for the people of Montana. And so, the breakthrough sciences that get commercialized are supposed to improve the lives of people. Any wealth creation is supposed to improve the lives of people. Any entrepreneurial activity is supposed to improve the lives of people. And so that sounds a very pluralistic, what is all of this for? It's for raising quality of life, productivity gains, whatever you want to do in the economics literature. But philanthropy can do things differently, in part because they're playing by different rules, which to me seems like also part of the risk. And I suppose my broader take would be why you want multiple stakeholders, why you want an ecosystem approach, is because you do want someone who's democratically. I want council and mayor and governor in any of these places to be at the table because they do have to answer to voters. And I do want philanthropy there because I want they can survive terms, and I do want individuals interested, which maybe is a very wishy-washy answer. I lose you in a couple minutes, so let me go to kind of like final stage of this that I wanted to get to, which is, and maybe Victor, because it's your birthday on this recording date, I'm going to go to you. But each of you, I want to know, like, you've just been made, you have all the board seats, or you're asked to totally remake a community foundation strategy or a local philanthropy, whatever. Is economic development part of your portfolio? If so, how are you thinking about it? How does it play out? And on this, your birthday, Victor, start there. You've been given the keys of the kingdom.
Oh, we get to design our own foundation. It's like make a foundation moment.
Yep.
Oh,
make a foundation. I've been meaning to tell you that this whole interview I've been interviewing the three of you. I got a boatload of cash I'm trying to give to someone to manage, and you guys have been interviewing for this the whole time.
Oh, wow. Honestly, the work, I would create a foundation to basically focus on entrepreneurship and shift the system to enable entrepreneurship forever. I think what we're doing at Right to Start is really, it's forever work. It's really trying to, how do you design a society that empowers, that gives people the power to build their lives from the bottom up, as opposed to relying on, government itself? How do you actually give people the means and the tools and the resources to create that kind of level playing field? Everyone's got a fighting chance, and they've got a chance to build themselves. And I think the idea of a foundation that can do it all from soup to nuts around that is where I would look. So yeah, I guess in many ways what we're doing, there's a lot of there's thousands and thousands of organizations in America, easily over 10,000, that help entrepreneurs directly. What there isn't enough of is the middleware layer of how do you enable that environment to be more effective. So those organizations are more effective. So the entrepreneurs themselves have a better shot that constantly engages policymakers. Like there's so many things that have happened in just the last year. Right to Start has been able to bring down barriers purely from just the simple steps of reducing red tape and fees and registration challenges for starting businesses. It took us 6 years and a lot of sweat and labor to get to this point, and we're still going. Why did it take this long for someone to focus on that problem? There should be a foundation focused on this kind of issue. So if I had $1 billion, I'd focus on exactly what we're doing at Right to Start and make it a permanent fixture in the American system.
Would you do, I'm going to ask all of you this, and I know I'm going to run out of time quick, but would you prioritize many small bets or a few big bets?
Both. I think there's the anchor, as Taylor's words. There's the anchor of the work. How do you drive it long term and sustainably and strategically? But like everything great bubbles up from the bottom up. And so how do you take lots of little bets to encourage the experimentation? And that's the challenge, right? Because it's easy for foundations to write bigger checks and hard to write little checks because you use the same processes. Oh God, you guys are funny. And I watch TikTok, so I know tea is a very nice thing to say about me. Thank you. So yeah, how do we take lots of little bets and encourage that? Because otherwise you rely on the big things, and the big things are slow and they're like turning battleships around. How do you sprinkle lots of stuff all the time while you focus on the anchor infrastructure?
Taylor, I got limited time. What are you doing with $1 billion?
I would first prioritize the disruptors. Who are those that are just kicking butt, taking names? I think that those disruptors in our ecosystem are really going to lead us to some really cool things. I like
you too much. I'm going to challenge you even more. But like, you're sitting and you are looking at 5% unemployment and rising in your community. Let's say you're looking at some homelessness, you're looking at some hunger, and you're going to say, I'm still making bets on long-term economic change.
1,000%. 1,000%. And it's none of these challenges are unique to any one place or thing. Who has disrupted that system? Who has done it? And let's share about it, just like what Victor is doing. So yeah, Victor's got my vote.
All right. We're building a coalition. Rae'Mah, you taking a different take or what?
I think I'll take maybe a slightly different take, but I think all of our nonprofits.
Please, we don't want consensus. We need division.
I would just say we're going to join on a collaboration. Okay.
Okay.
But I think I like to call the age before, like maybe from 1980 to early 2000s, like the age of gatekeeping, and like the internet has opened up this access, but we still haven't like demystified entrepreneurship for enough people. So my nonprofit is going to be focused in on the
Not nonprofit, Rae'Mah. You're the moneymaker.
Oh, my moneymaker?
You're the foundation. You're leading a foundation, and I want to know where you're making your bets.
Well,
You
see,
got $1
this is
billion,
obvious. I need to
Rae'Mah.
be doing in the education system because I didn't read the assignment sheet. I didn't make my nonprofit.
Okay.
But you guys get my journal mission. I want to bring demystification to entrepreneurship and then maybe fund those. So maybe it's just a giant venture studio. There
All
we
right.
go.
But again, even if you see hunger in your community, you see homelessness, and you're saying like, I am, if I'm taking this on, I'm going for long-term economic change before the short-term crisis that people are experiencing today.
Is there a way to do both?
I say yes. And I say yes because entrepreneurship is a pathway out of that. If you look at all of these studies that have been done for years and years and years, mortality rates, the lower you go on the, I almost said the supply chain, but the rank within industry or wherever you are, if you're a frontline worker, you're going to die sooner than your top line workers, right? So if you have the ability to take autonomy of oneself, if you have the ability to make decisions, to innovate, to influence how your day goes, you're going to live longer. You're going to have pathways out of those things. You're going to have a lot of different things that you wouldn't have had. And so I believe it starts with entrepreneurship. Yeah,
I think entrepreneurship is my polio vaccine that everybody just needs to take. So it can you just need to go. It's a rite of passage. Thank you, Taylor. She wrapped up my points eloquently.
I got to go, but I like what I hear you guys saying in part is, well, if anything, democratically elected systems are better at responding to crisis. So if philanthropy operates outside of it, why ought not go for the longer term change, provided we do think we're providing solutions for the short-term pain people are experiencing today. That seems like the heart of what philanthropy struggles with, and many in philanthropy have told me they struggle with exactly that. So thank you to Rae'Mah, Victor, and Taylor for walking through the role philanthropy can play in economic development. That's this week's Builders Live. We'll see you next month. Victor, Taylor, Rae'Mah, thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys.
See you next time, friends. Bye. Happy birthday, Victor.
Happy